I'm Tamala. It's good to meet all of you. This is your mic not working again? Simon. This is Simon, and we are Harmonize. We are a organizational development, worker-owned cooperative, and we do a lot of work helping organizations bridge that gap between vision and action, right? By helping people cohere their culture, structures, and align that with their liberatory values. So that's the work that we do, and obviously, inside of that, things come up. Lots of conflict. And we've developed a framework that we call conflict resilience to really help organizations be able to meet conflict, stay functional in its presence, and grow from that place. Want to get into it?
So one of the first things to think about is just what is conflict? And the word conflict for many people can invite thoughts of fear or intensity, something to be avoided, something to be managed, something that is like wrong. We have conflict when something's gone wrong. We much prefer to think of conflict as a call for change. So think about like an earthquake, for example. At the fault line of an earthquake, it can be really scary. It can be a lot of rupture, there's friction, things can fall down, there can be destruction, there can be chaos, but the earthquake is one of the things that produces the mountain. And a mountain is a place from which we have a different perspective, there's a different layer of beauty, it creates something. Conflict is much the same way. It can feel really intense and chaotic, but it also can create something. Another way that we like to think about conflict is the way that we can think about pain in the body. So if I have pain, I can think of this as something wrong, but it's also my body asking for me to pay attention and attend to something. And if I attend to that pain properly, I can create increased health, increased well-being, increased pleasure. Right? So conflict doesn't need to be something to be avoided. It can also be understood as a call for change. And then the question then becomes, how do we actually meet conflict in a way that unlocks that change? Yeah, before we invite people to share a story about a time that you met a conflict in a way that made you connect with some new potential, we will share, as we like to do, our own conflicts. So Tamala, what was the last time we were in a conflict last week?
So last week, a dynamic came to a head between Simon and I. We had felt it percolating for some time. Neither of us had gone toward it. And 3 weeks ago, I had been like, hey, we should try and go for this project. And Simon was like, yeah. And then last week, we got into a meeting, and he was like, hey, I'm not trying to do that. And I was like, what? And that brought up a lot of feelings inside of me, because I felt like this was a part of a pattern. So it triggered a lot of things for me, and it triggered some things for Simon, and we decided in this moment in the afternoon on a Tuesday at the end of our 3-hour-long Zoom session was the time to really get into this.
So we had been experiencing some dynamic beforehand, and it had reached this kind of boiling point where I felt like I couldn't do the next project unless we addressed it. So when I brought this up, Tamala had feelings, and it easily could have spun out. It easily could have been an argument. It easily could have been a fight. But I watched Tamala take a breath, do something inside of herself to be able to meet me in a way that we could find some new possibility. And then I did something inside of myself to be able to bring my feelings in a way that would maximize the potential that we found something good in this. So I said something like, Tamala, I know, here's all the great things that I feel like about the way we work together and about you. And I know I have my own trust baggage from my own life. And I'm having trouble trusting you around some things. And I need help figuring out what is happening. Like, what is the thing am I totally just projecting my nonsense onto you? Is there really something going on? But I did something to try to bring that in a way that would make it as easy as possible for her to work with me to find something good.
And then I did my part, took a couple breaths, and then shared with Simon my perspective, right? The dynamics that I was seeing, and also being able to point to the things, that spot that you're talking about where you feel like I don't have the next 10 words, you're right, I don't. And part of that is because you haven't shared your arc with me, right? So I feel like there's something in your mind, right, that you want done, and I'm attuning to that, and I can notice when we're in a conversation and you want a particular thing said, and I'm not sure what you want said. And so I'm sort of like, well, what's going on there? And so I was able to affirm for him the particular thing that he was pointing to, but then also call out a larger dynamic that I thought was happening between us. And so we were able to really work through it together.
And out of that conversation, which quickly could have turned into a shenanigan about power and roles and insecurities and trust, and it was in the context of like, are we going to take a project? So it's like, are we going to make money? And we could privilege and class, all of those things could have come up, but we were able to navigate them and actually come to different agreements about how we were going to manage work together, different approaches to how we were going to relate to this dynamic, and then overall just a fluidity of the ability to talk about it and understand that we're navigating it. And that process actually increased our trust so much that we can sit here, whatever, like a week later and joke about it in front of a whole bunch of people. That could have exploded and actually made us unable to work together, but instead, here we are. So that's just a quick little gesture toward this idea that there was a conflict, but we were able to meet it in a way where we identified what was going on, we found deeper communication, deeper trust, a deeper precision in how we delegated roles with one another, and specific strategies for how we were going to work together, all because we leaned into the conflict as opposed to avoiding it. So that's our cute little story. We want to just invite you. You know, you may or may not know your neighbor, so don't feel the need to like bare your heart and soul to a stranger, but also maybe try it, because what's the worst that can happen? Yeah, just think for a moment about a conflict that you were in and a time where you learned something from that conflict. Something about a moment where it could have spiraled, but instead you found some other possibility that was locked in it. Maybe you found it quick, maybe you found it like a year later, but think of something and quickly share with your neighbor.
So when I was starting the nonprofit that my partner and I now run, her mother was our third partner, founding partner, and we were trying to work things out. We're coming from different places. I had my own ideas, but I was being really polite, but I was also not doing anything. And she turned to me one day and she goes, Nita, if you want to be a leader, then lead. And I was like, what? I mean, and she's a very nice lady. She's such a nice person. Never expected her to say that. And I didn't get mad. I just sat with it for a second, or a day, or a week. And I thought, you know what? She's right. And it was the best thing ever to not have, responded the way I normally would, like crying or getting really resentful. But no, it was like the best thing, just straight up, just said that. So that was it.
Oh, that's a juicy one. And that's going to lead right into what we're talking about, right? That moment where you meet the conflict and someone looks you in your face and gives you some hard feedback. And you've got that choice inside of yourself. How am I going to react to this, right? And we heard our friend share, usually there's a way that I do that. I collapse, I cry a little bit, but that's not the way that I met this moment. And those dynamics are exactly what we're about to get into.
So, what is conflict resilience? If conflict is a call for change, conflict resilience is the ability to answer that call for change. It's to unlock the possibility within conflict and to prevent it from becoming overly disruptive. So there's tons of conflicts inside of our organizations all the time. So we want to be able to meet those and unlock this possibility And at the same time, we need to make sure they don't become so disruptive that they derail what we're doing as an organization, right? It's good to unlock the possibility, but if we're farmers, we also need to keep farming while we're doing that project. So the way that we do that is by skillfully choosing and sometimes changing the way that we be, see, and work together. What does it mean to be? Well, we're all humans. We have thoughts, feelings, impulses, sensations. We're all having this human experience right now, making choices about how we navigate that. We're being in some way, and we're being here together. Seeing, we're all analyzing things and seeing the causality of, seeing and making sense of our world. So that matters. And then we're all working together. How do we join our individual actions to make a whole that's greater than the sum of our parts? That's seeing, being, and working together. So by shifting those things, that's how we meet a conflict in a way that answers and unlocks the possibility. So we've been doing conflict resilience and conflict engagement for a long time. And please. And we've built out kind of like a framework, starting from this question of like, not just as an individual, what does it take to be able to meet conflict and unlock the possibility, but as a group, as an organization, what does it take? And we think it's something about the way that all individuals show up to the game. It's something about the tools we use as those individuals to work one-on-one with each other. And it's something about the agreements and the processes that we use as a group. And all of those things together really allow us to unlock that possibility. So we're gonna share kind of one little tool on each of those levels today. On the individual level, we're gonna talk about nervous systems and our body's reactions to conflict and the choices that we can make. On the interpersonal level, we're gonna talk about sentence starters, just cute little phrases we can say that help us show up well. And then on an organizational level, we're gonna talk about 4 main types of organizational conflicts and how to set up a group to be able to address them. So, we'll start with the personal. When we meet a conflict, we can be more or less self-aware in ourselves. So self-awareness is knowing and being able to identify our needs, our desires, our patterns, and our emotions in order to make choices. We always have a lot of thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Like right now, for example, I have a desire to like be an effective communicator and support a collective vision of liberation, but like also I really want you to like think I'm smart and funny, right? Both those things are happening. So the way that I respond and navigate that is gonna really impact what happens here. And if we were to come into conflict, if I really wanted you to see and validate me, and I also really wanted to advocate for an opinion, and I also wanted to protect my friend, the way I would balance all of those things would really impact how we were able to relate. So the more aware of these things we are, the better we can navigate, better choices we can make. And a lot of those choices start inside of our bodies. Oh my gosh, we have those. Nervous systems are complicated, and here's a slide. So, making people think I'm funny, great. A very simple way to understand the autonomic nervous system is that there's 2 components, a parasympathetic nervous system and a sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is like fight, flight, freeze. When you see the lion and you want to go do things, that is the sympathetic nervous system doing its job well. Post-lunch, if you're trying to like nap and digest, that is the parasympathetic doing its job really well. So we're gonna go through these a little bit about our nervous system and ask some questions because the way that these things show up really impacts how we relate. If you are in a conflict with somebody whose body is telling them they are fighting a lion, that is gonna be very different than being in a conflict with somebody whose body is telling them that they should take a nap. Getting it. Okay, so let's just first, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems are both really healthy, really important, getting out of people's ways, really important aspects of what keeps us healthy. And when we're in the sweet spot of our nervous system, The sympathetic is what keeps people attentive, responsive, and engaged, right? Those of you who are sitting up right now like this, right, looking, you're like, oh, that your sympathetic nervous system is like, I'm gonna be here for this, right? And the parasympathetic, the people right now who are like, I'm here, I'm just trying to take it in, digesting this food in my belly, what stays in my mind is great, and what leaves is fine. Great, that's your parasympathetic. You're doing a great job, right? So when we're in the sweet spot, we're able to be attentive and relaxed. We're able to be responsive and receptive. This helps us navigate conflict really well, and it's not always where we are. Because sometimes we get a little farther out into our stretch zone. So the sympathetic nervous system that's when you feel agitated, like I gotta get out of my chair and what is going on and I'm really frustrated and angry right now. That's the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is gonna be when you feel fatigue, apathy, spaciness. And this is right, when we feel in the stretch zone, we're a little less able to make intentional choices. We're a little less able to really follow through on our deepest, most collaborative, and most liberatory intentions when we get into that stretch zone. But we're still able to at least like modulate, right? And that's what happened with Tamala and Mai's conflict, right? I said something very quickly, Tamala was in her stretch zone, and it was agitation. It's like, are you kidding me, Simon? Right, that's where she went. But she was able to then do something to come back into that sweet spot to be able to navigate it successfully. But we're not always in our stretch. We also kind of get out of control sometimes. So when we're really out of control in our nervous system, that's when fight, flight, freeze comes. And that's where, when parasympathetic, that's where we like submit or faint. And those are reactions that sometimes are incredibly adaptive and are sometimes really, really appropriate. If you actually see a lion, it's gonna be great to fight or fly, right? And in the human world, there are really circumstances when it is appropriate for us to take on a fight, flight, or freeze response. That's real. There are reasons to do that. Same with submitting or fainting. There's real reasons why that is useful sometimes. And one of the things that we're dealing with as humans is that we move into those responses at moments that it isn't necessarily the right thing to do, right? If you come to me and say, Simon, I don't like your beard, and I go into fight, flight, freeze, not really a well-calibrated response, right? But if you come and there's like a violent circumstance, maybe it is. So while we're navigating all of these things, we're navigating inside our bodies, right? Are we attentive? Are we responsive? Are we engaged? Are we relaxed? Are we receptive? Are we digestive? Or are we stretching? Okay, now it's like agitation, fear, anger. Or are we totally out of control, fight, flight, freeze? We exhibit kind of patterns of reactions when we hit these when we get out of control. So when your sympathetic nervous system like really goes off the rails, it's attack self. So anytime my inner narrative starts telling me that I'm like a terrible person and I've done something wrong and there's nothing wrong with me and I just attack myself, that's my sympathetic nervous system going off the rails. If I attack other, that's also the sympathetic nervous system going off the rails, going out of control, right? And that could be physically attacking other. It also could be verbally attacking other. It also could be just like in my mind saying a bunch of terrible things about a person, right? It also is what causes me to freeze and then sometimes avoid. On the other side, right, the parasympathetic, when that gets out of control, I could fawn, I could collapse, I could withdraw, and I could also avoid. It's kind of a different way of avoiding. But right, that moment where like if you're in a situation and you at first feel like you're engaged, then something happens and you kind of want to like withdraw and turn away, and at some point you find yourself being like, I don't even really want to be here. I'm not even here. Like if I just pretend like I'm not here, then the situation will go away and I'll be okay. That's probably because your parasympathetic nervous system is telling you to collapse, right? If you look at someone as like, I will just do anything to make this person happy so I don't have to experience what it would be like for them to be something other than happy, you're fawning, right? So these are things that happen, and the idea is like, sometimes you need to do those things, and sometimes we do those things when it's actually not the best thing to do. When we're in conflict, one of the things that can happen is we go into a space, a patterned space, and then we interact from each other from that patterned space. So if I'm not self-aware, and I show up and I think I'm just like making a logical argument and trying to be helpful and rational, but like what I'm actually doing is embodying fight, and I'm trying to fight you and argue with you to tell you that I'm really smarter than you because I feel insecure about myself and I'm in like a fight mode. And then let's say you on the other side of that are like a little fatigued and a little apathetic, a little spacey. Wow, we're really not gonna have a very easy time unlocking the possibility inside of that conflict. Similarly, like if I am in an intense situation and I just wanna like withdraw and pretend like I'm not here, and then you come over here and you're like, come over filled with your own self-loathing, attacking self, attacking other, and I'm like, we're not doing it, right? So the reason that we share this map is to invite a bit of self-awareness, and we're gonna ask you to reflect a little bit now. Because again, the idea is not that any of these nervous system states are bad. We all cycle through them all the time. The idea is that the more aware we are of the state of our nervous system in a moment, the more skillful we can be in meeting one another. And the more aware we are of our nervous system state in a moment, the more we can modulate it to be as useful as possible. If I know that I'm angry, and I know that because I'm angry, my sympathetic nervous system is probably out of control, if I know that, I'm less likely to believe the story I am telling myself about how terrible Tamala is, and more likely to take a walk and a nap and then come back from a place in a sweet spot. Cool. Before we go into the like little exercise, any like questions or reactions to this? How are we feeling in our nervous system?
So when I'm thinking about when you're feeling dismissed and disrespected, and we were talking about, you know, the initial time when you feel dismissed, but then you just collapse or you walk away and you don't want to deal with it. But there's this sometimes when you are totally like taken off guard, and I'm just like, did you really just say that to me right now? But I don't have anything else. I don't have the facts to back it up. I didn't have the speech prepared in my head. So I'm not going to really collapse and withdraw, but I don't have the counterattack, part. So then I find myself, I just kind of like, I freeze because I'm like, That's a question for you.
Cool. Awesome. So the whole idea of this map is to enable you to say what you just said in a way that we can all understand it really clearly. So the then what is different for every person in every situation, right? So the real then what is like, oh, I noticed that I freeze. Okay, so then the next thing is probably you're gonna wanna figure out a way to come out of freeze to be able to do something else, right? That's probably what, you're probably not gonna wanna go from freeze to collapse to attack other, right? You're probably gonna wanna go from freeze to like, okay, now I feel agitated, okay, now I'm back in my sweet spot, and now what I'm gonna do. And when we think about this, this is like a individual awareness tool, right? To be able to notice the patterns, right? For me, I love to attack other, especially when it's authority. So I know that about myself well enough that if I'm in a room and I start noticing myself critiquing somebody in power, I go, I'm probably triggered right now. Like, I don't really believe the stories I'm telling myself. I'm probably just triggered. And let me figure out what I can do about that. So it's this self-awareness tool. And then one of the ways that we use this inside of organizations or inside of communities, is we do this exercise, except a lot more slowly, and with the group that you're actually working with over time. So imagine that you had a group, a team, there's 10 of you, and you sit down and you really talk about, when do you go into these things? When do you go into these reactions? What are the patterns that throw you into these different nervous system states? And by doing that and normalizing just this conversation that we're all navigating our bodies and we're all navigating our nervous systems all the time, it becomes a little bit easier to interrupt a conversation and say, hang on, I need to pause because all I'm feeling right now is freeze. And we can't go forward on the conversation because I can't show up for it. So let's pause and do something different. Or the ability to say like, okay, I'm feeling like I'm about to collapse right now, so I'm gonna try to find a different thing, and this might come out as really angry, but I'm gonna go for it because I'm not gonna collapse, so please hold me in grace as I try to communicate, right? Wow, this is a different culture if we're able to talk and be aware and work together on this, knowing that what we're doing is we're all just trying to figure out how we can genuinely create the environment for us to be as close to our sweet spot as possible. And the phrase, like, when Tamala and I hear the phrase, like, a safe space, one of the things we hear is it's a space where we all can be as close to our sweet spot as possible. And when people leave their sweet spot, we'll help them find it again, because that's where we collaborate the best.
During my childhood and teenage years, and I wasn't able to like show my emotions and what I was thinking. So at the age of 18, I exploded and I said everything, and I screamed and yelled and all of that. So I've been working on that, because for me it's kind of like a painful topic. That's why I chose this one. But something that I've been noticing during these past conflicts is that even though I'm willing to work on this, other people might not be in the same spot, and that's so difficult. And for me, I was told once that I had to protect myself and walk away, not because I don't have something to say or something to do, but it will hurt me even more. Try to talk to these people that are not thinking the same, that they are not willing to, like share what they are feeling, and they will try to attack you instead of addressing the issue.
Thank you. And I hear in that, right, like the full depth of a human experience, like we're all going through a lot out here, trying to navigate it. And however we're able to navigate those patterns that we inherited from our own childhood and before, that's gonna impact the way that we relate to one another, because, right, we're working our stuff out all the time in relationship to another. And one of the puzzles that we have kind of in movement building or organization building is, what layer of intimacy and vulnerability are we going to ask each other to communicate about? Because what you just shared was beautiful, and I'm glad that you felt good sharing that. And you shared about your personal childhood. You shared story, and we have a question as a group of like, we all are navigating that layer together, right? Do we always want to expect from one another that we communicate and share that layer with one another, right? Do you want to know about like the baggage I have from my childhood and how it's impacting me right now? If we go toward that, right, that's a choice we can make. Does this make sense so far? Cool. So that's one of the puzzles that we have, because if we don't talk about it at all, we end up in like hyper-rational pretending like emotions don't exist, and then we just act that out silently, and that's nonsense. If we go too far, we often can like bring depths and unprocessed and unresolved traumas into spaces that we don't actually have the capacity to hold as a group. Or maybe we do have the capacity to hold, but like we were just having a meeting about the budget, so like I care, but like there's a time and a place, right? So that's one of the reasons why this is a tool that we introduce to groups. Because we think it's actually a demand that you could integrate into most cultures, which is like, look, if you're gonna talk, if we're having an intense conversation, before you talk, I want you to tell me where you think you are on this map. Before you open your mouth, say, I feel agitated and afraid. Cool, I'll do my best to hold that. And be open to the feedback of someone saying, I'm not going to work with you right now about something because your nervous system is in a place that I'm not gonna deal with, right? And you don't have to go all the way the distance, but just like, hey, you're really exhibiting a lot of attack other right now. We can't do this, we need to pause. It seems like you're really collapsed. I care about that, and I'll meet you when you're out of collapse. What do you need to come out of collapse? You need something from me, or we just need to pause? And you feel how we're talking about that depth, but I'm not necessarily asking someone to bear story level with me. So that's another thing that we think that this approach is helpful for, and we can also talk about, we have some more like emotional and psychological ways to do it too. One more question before we move on.
So if you're in a group that has not been trained in this, take for example my HOA, and I'm sure several other people can sympathize, and you have someone who is aggressive, leaning on bullying, and how can we be supportive? How can members of an audience be supportive and help reduce the tension to make it less stressful, especially for the person who is the object of that aggressiveness?
Well, here's the quick and easy answer to how to solve every challenging issue.
Yeah. I think like if I was in that situation and I was trying to use this tool, the thing that I would start with would be reflecting what I was seeing. So I would just do something like, hang on a sec, it seems like, Joe, you're really in an attack other kind of space. And as Simon, you being in the attack other space is actually starting to make me feel a little agitated. And it seems to me that Bob, who you're attacking, is kind of starting to go into collapse. Bob, I'm curious, does that feel accurate to you? Yeah, it does. Cool. So that's what's happening, and now that's what we're talking about. We're not having this argument anymore. We're talking about the fact that the attack other triggered agitation and collapse, and we need to pause because we're not doing this. Yeah.
Our next tool might help with that.
Hopefully it'll go with that, but yeah, there's a lot of... There is something really powerful about clear reflection and boundaries. It can be incredibly disarming to receive any kind of nonsense and have the only response be, wow, it sounds like you're really angry and you want to attack Bob. Cool, next comment. Oh, okay, we're still going. Key takeaways. So some of these reactions, they can be internal or external, right? So external, for attack other, I could like yell or I could leave the room. It's very obvious, but I could also internally judge really harshly, or I could go silent and tune out. So it could be, I could do it externally, I could do it internally. Either way, it's my nervous system basically being like, something's not okay, we need help. And when we react when we're in those different nervous system states. And if we're expressing the reaction, we are probably in that state. So this is what I said about like, the moment I notice myself attacking other in my head, I kind of have a choice. Do I believe the stories I'm telling about you in my head, or do I think my nervous system is off the rails? Which one do I do? Right? When I collapse, right, do I believe that I'm not worthy, or do I think I need a snack? Right? What do I do? So by noticing anytime you're in any of those reactions, the question being like, cool, what do I need to bring me back to a space that's a little bit more balanced? And different reactions to conflict are totally normal, right? They're all normal, they're all okay, we're all just humans trying to figure it out. So it's not that one of these is better than the other or worse than the other. The question is, I think, go to the next one. Okay, so the last one. Okay. Yeah, so the question is really like, is my reaction in the moment appropriate and adaptive? Right? If I want to fight somebody, right, am I aware that I want to fight them? Is my desire to fight them attuned to what is required in the moment? And is it adaptive? Is it actually going to be helpful? And sometimes fighting somebody is going to be, you're going to be aware of it, it's going to be attuned, and it's going to be adaptive. That's what you got to do. And sometimes you're going to want to do it, and it's actually, you're not really aware of it, it's actually not attuned, and it's not adaptive, right? So the more we can kind of think about these things and be aware of these things, the more we can make choices about how we want to navigate it. And the more we can make those choices, the better we're going to be about finding that possibility inside of the conflict. When I told Tamala that I didn't want to do the project, Tamala did, I think, kind of want to fight me, right? But she was aware that she wanted to fight me, decided that it was not actually attuned to the moment to bite my head off, and that it wouldn't actually be adaptive. So instead, she chose something else. Cool. Hopefully, I'm never in a conflict with you where it is adaptive, but it might be.
I'll win the fight. Thank you, Simon. All right, so now let's get into a tool for that interpersonal layer, right? Because we just spoke about what's happening inside of you when something's going on, but often when we're in a conflict, we're not just alone in our rooms experiencing it, right? We are with other people, right? And experiencing their energy, and we have to interact with them and work with them through it, right? Like the example that our friends here gave, right? When someone disrespects you and you're like, hold on. Or when you're at the HOA and something pops off, right? How do we move with that? And so we're going to introduce a tool that we like to call generative sentence starters, right? Which is a tool to start that hard conversation and help you clearly communicate your intentions, right? Because sometimes when our nervous systems are activated and we're sort of lost, I find that these generative sentence starters can be really helpful to help you grab onto that, right? Where it's like, I don't know where to go, I don't know what to do. But if you can take a moment and pause and reflect, you can have something that you can bring into that moment to say, to help you move through that moment with the other person in a way that's hopefully going to de-escalate the situation and help you all work through it towards the possibility on the other side. So let's get into these. So we've got some different scenarios, right? Because one generative sentence starter isn't always gonna work, you know? So we want to be aware of the situation that we're in and our intention, what it is that we want to happen on the other side of this situation. So you might be in a situation where you want to invite collaboration, right? So you're in a situation, it's hard to keep engaging in this dynamic with the person, but you're not completely out of control, and what you want to do is offer your reflections and your opinion and get their thoughts on it as well. Because often when we're in the middle of a conflict, right, we're in our own minds, we've got some ideas about what's going on, right, but we always know in a situation, there's like my side, your side, and the truth. Right? And so we often want to invite other people in so that we can collaborate and figure out what's going on together. That's the situation that I found myself in when Simon came to me with his reflections on our trust issue. It's like, okay, there's a dynamic here. I want to share with you what I'm thinking is going on so we can sift through this and figure it out together. And in those cases, one thing you can say, if you're like a computer, is, I'd like to invite collaboration around something I'm finding tough, right? If you don't have any ideas of your own, but you know you want to bring somebody else into it, and you've memorized this, it can be a nice thing to grab onto, right? But the key thing with a generative sentence starter is making it your own, really practicing it, and getting it in your bones, so that when the situation comes up, you can just go to it. Right? So some other examples. Do you have time to tend to our connection? So we could be in the middle of a situation, right? You feel like there's a pattern emerging here. I can feel in my body, right, that my nervous system is beginning to activate. But you also know, I care about this other person, and I think they also care about me. And I want to take a moment away from what we're talking about right now and talk about this underlying issue, because it's gonna be difficult for us to continue moving forward. It's gonna be difficult for me to remain in this moment until we talk about it. And so one thing you can say is, do you have time to tend to our connection? It's often disarming for the other person, right? In a moment of, oh, yeah, I care about you. We can talk about that. Another way, this is mine, truly my preferred sentence starter is, something didn't sit quite right for me. Can I check in with you about it, right? And now I'm letting them know I'm feeling away. I need something that I need to share. So they know, okay, we're about to walk into what might be a difficult situation, right? But we're gonna do it from a place of mutuality, and I've been invited into that, and it's not a situation where like, I don't know your name, but what you shared where someone has said something disrespectful. There's a moment where it can be like, what did you just say to me? Or you could say, I hear you. That didn't sit quite right. Can we talk about that? Right? And then that opens the space for you to be able to get into that. So I want you to take a moment now and think about a situation where you might like to invite some collaboration. Maybe there's been a dynamic going on with a friend or a family member or somebody at work, and you just notice it comes up sometimes, and you're just like, oh, I don't know about this. Like, I'm not sure that I know what's going on. I really want to understand. What would be a good thing that you feel like you can say in that moment, right? That's in alignment with this, that comes from your voice that you would feel comfortable saying. So like develop your own generative sentence starter about how you would get into that moment and then share it with your neighbor. So who has a sentence starter that they'd like to share about how they would invite someone into a collaborative moment?
So my go-to usually when I'm noticing something is like, I'm noticing this energy's coming up from you. Am I perceiving that correctly? And can you share what you're feeling?
I love that. Thank you. And that also reminds me, the beautiful thing about that is that you can also say that in the moment that was shared earlier, right? When someone's just said something really, really disrespectful, right? And you can feel in your body, it's time to fight, right? But you can pause and make a choice, right? To engage them in this particular way, right? I felt some energy from you. Can we talk about that? And then once we're talking about it, I can say, that thing you said was really disrespectful. I did not appreciate that at all, right? But now we're in a container where we can talk about it and we're not just escalating, right? We pause, we reflect back, we let them know, hey, let's talk about what's going on between us right now. Thank you for that. All right, now, another situation. Sometimes you want to offer a different opinion without creating like competition or escalating the situation, right? So you might not be trying to be openly oppositional or denying the legitimacy of their feelings, but you want to offer a different perspective, right? We can be in a conversation where someone is like, you know, I just feel like Cynthia really hates me and doesn't care about this organization, and I'm really bothered and I think we should fire her, right? And you might feel like, you know what, some of that about Cynthia is true. But as an organization, right, there are also other aspects of this that we need to talk about, right? So I'm not trying to get into a situation with you where we're about to battle it out about Cynthia, but I want to offer some other opinions that we can work through together as well. And so you might say something like, I understand what you're saying, but I'd like to add some difference into the conversation, right? This is not about to be a fight. I don't have an issue with you. I just want to talk about some other ideas, right? I want to put some other opinions on the table. If you're another human, you could also say something like, I agree with you, right? I'm on board with what you're saying, but do you have space to hear my experience and perspective, right? Because we might be aligned on the overall situation, right? But there might be other information that we want to bring to the table. I feel like you have an example there you want to share.
Just to make it as real as we can you, right, would you be down right now to not when I brought up the like, we should stop, what you really thought? like the unfiltered, like all of it, go as dark as you want, and then we'll talk about how the sentence starter works.
So what I really thought is, here Simon is again, you're doing that thing again, right? Where you like to take control and you collapse, and because you're feeling away, now you don't want to do it. And it doesn't matter what I want or what we've agreed to. You've just decided to follow your whims, and I am a victim to that, and I'm tired of it.
So I definitely hear what you're saying about the power and about the collapse and the whims. There's something else I want to explore. Do we have the ability to go in that other direction too? Right? So I didn't have to fight it. Right? I'm looking for I agree, and it's cool, and y'all could feel discharge right away, even in this little made up little universe. Right? And then I'm asking this other thing also, and then Tamala actually gets to be yes, I can. Or actually no, I'm gonna need you to eat a lot more.
And sometimes we do that, and there's a sentence starter for that too. But yes.
So you ran a bunch of yes.
Yes, and I'm no, I don't want to do that. I'm tired of this nonsense, and I need you to get this through your head so that I know that lands before we can move forward.
Cool. So you need it to land. You need to know that what lands is the sense that I'm getting overwhelmed, then I'm collapsing, then I'm reacting to my collapse by refusing to engage and exercising power in order to do that. Does that feel right?
Yes.
Cool.
I'm gonna stop.
Yeah, what? I know that pattern, right? I know that pattern inside myself, and I am aware of it and trying to do the best that I can with it. I can't totally focus on it because there's other things that I want to do, but I hear you don't want to move off this until you know that it's clicked. What do you need to see to make sure that it's clicked for you? How are you gonna be able to get what you need from me right now?
I need an apology.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I definitely, for real, I am sorry that I know that this is cycling, and I know I get overwhelmed, and I know I get caught inside of this thing inside myself, and that the best reaction I have is to withdraw, and yeah, and I see the exercise of power, and I'm sorry for that, and I am invested in something else. Is there more that you would want to hear right there? Cool. Right? And now, no, and we're not done though, right? Right? Because I have feelings. Right? And this is fun because we didn't actually do this, but this is very real right now. Right? Right? But yeah, that matters. This is the whole idea of this whole sentence starter. Is that matters a lot, and that's real, right? I do collapse, I do get overwhelmed, and I do exercise power in that way. Super real. And one of the reasons that I'm having trouble finding a different strategy with it is because there's actually other dynamics I'm balancing all at the same time. So in order for me to really find a different way through this pattern inside myself, I actually need us to explore the way that we relate and the way that we work together, because that is this context that this is playing out in. So can we do that now, or do we want to revisit that at a different time?
I'm cool to do it now, but you could also ask for a pause, but I'm one of those people who's yeah, let's get into it.
Cool. So now you feel now what's about to happen is we're going to shift the dynamic, and I'm going to explore myself, and I might end up giving feedback to Tamala. Now, how it doesn't become passive-aggressive nonsense is that I stayed in that role until she told me to get out of it. I didn't use this to escape. I really was I have something else, can I bring it? And if she says no, you can't bring it, then I have to ask myself, do I have the capacity to stay with what she's bringing right now? And it goes back to that nervous system thing, right? In that moment, I was okay, she's saying things. I'm in front of a bunch of people. This is real. She's reading me. She's reading me for power and collapse and the way I navigate my own trauma that I've had from childhood. She's reading me for that in front of this group of people. Okay. which I asked for. But so I'm like, am I cool? Am I cool? Can we go farther? Can I continue with this hypo? If I couldn't, then I have to be like, actually, I can't go toward what you're bringing until you hear what I have to say. But you can't hear what I have to say until I hear what you have to say. Cool, we spotted that quick. Let's pause. And we need to figure out how we're going to come back with more resource together so that somebody can figure out how to unlock it. And sometimes that's bringing another person. Sometimes that's having a facilitator come in. And it always is about looking at how power and risk works.
And we have tools for that. So email us. Thank you. You can tell we've been working together for a long time. We've seen things. And it's just easier to go into it sometimes, right? But it does require you to have a grasp of your own self-awareness and what you can handle in a moment and be real about your own stuff, right? Because if you're gonna ask someone else to do that, you have to do that as well, right? We're not just throwing tomatoes, right? There's a whole lot going on. All right, here is another one that Simon, I think also used here, right? Like, all those feelings are super real. Can I share with you my read of what might be creating them, right? But notice, all of this starts with a validation, because that's often what's happening in a conflict where someone's like bringing a lot, right? And it's really important sometimes that we're able to say, I hear you. Right? I see what you are saying, I feel that, right? And I have thoughts and feelings and an experience around this too. Can we collaborate around this together? All right, now that you've seen a couple of examples, talk to your partner at your table and see what you can come up with about how you would approach a moment like that. Who's got an example for how to engage someone who's given you some difficult feedback you agree with, but you also want to be able to offer your own opinion? You've got some feelings and thoughts as well. Who's got a good one?
So the last thing that you said really resonated as far as like the sentence starters, because that's something I kind of use in my everyday life and my own personal relationship. And it's like all of your feelings and like all of your feelings are like completely valid and you're allowed to feel them. Is it possible for me to like share, like give some perspective from what I'm seeing from an outside perspective? And that's usually what I'll like go with, because sometimes when we get so stuck in our heads, it's hard to see everything else that's going on outside that might be playing into it. Because I know I do the same thing. It's like once I get up there, I'm like, oh geez, I need to get out of it.
Exactly, I love that. Notice how they begin with everything you're feeling is super valid and you're allowed to feel that way, right? Because that is really the key to disarming, right? And getting somebody on the same page with you. Now, it's a little harder in this situation here when you've got some stuff on your chest and it needs to come out. And you know it's gonna be messy. You haven't been able to actually work through it. Simon just stood up here and took a lot of messiness, right? There's a lot of accusation in what I said, a lot of assumption about his own like inner personal processes and feelings, right? And I didn't ask for permission. He did ask me to do it though in this situation. But there are times when it's like we are in the middle of some messiness and there's a lot going on and I have not had the time to be able to really parse through and understand your side and know where I'm feeling, but it's gotta come out. I need it to come out, and I think if we put it on the table, we can work through that better. And if that is your situation, you could say something like, I need to verbalize some things. Can we create a container, right? There's some things that I need to share. Can we create like a safe space for me to get that out and you understand that I know that what I'm about to say is messy. I don't believe every part of it. I don't believe all of the stories that I'm telling, but they're going on in my head and I need to get them out so that you can help me, help us find what's true there. You could also say something like, I know this isn't totally clear. Can I get it out? And we sift through it together. This is my go-to one, where it's like, I don't have it all yet, but I want to be able to put it out there. It's going to be messy. It might cross a line. You might feel hurt, but I want you to know I know that's happening. Can you help me through it? And then, is it okay if I share some things? They're a little messy, and I need help figuring out what's real there, right? For this moment, Simon has offered to allow a volunteer to share their messiness with him. You can project whatever you want to onto him. If there are some feelings that you've got about
if you feel like you're in conflict with me right now, right? If there's something hard, or if there's just like you want to see what it's like to run some conflict energy and watch me use these tools to meet it. Either of those things, we can do a little practice thing.
who's got big feelings for someone who's not in the room.
So I don't know why you were saying that, because I was trying to help, but then you reacted that way. You trying to blame me from the other people, and you were talking about this huge problem in front of all of my friends, and you tried to shame me. It made me feel embarrassed, and I can't believe that you're doing this. You are hurting me a lot, and you don't want to talk to me about this, and everything is about you all of a sudden. And that wasn't the original problem. You weren't the original, person impacted by something that happened. So I don't know why you're doing this.
I'm hearing like in the meeting, I changed something from, I refocused the situation on what you were trying to bring up, and I blamed you in public, and I kind of dragged you in front of your friends. I feel like I didn't get all of it. What else? What am I not getting yet?
Yes, you did that. Because you pretended that you were helping someone else by blaming me because of what that person did, but somehow you dragged that blame to me, and you embarrassed me in front of other people because I tried to help.
Yeah. Cool. So, yeah, I hear I blamed you in front of other people for something that wasn't yours to hold, and that was embarrassing, and I embarrassed you in front of other people. I also hear like some things you're saying about what you think's happening inside me. I'm not sure they resonate with me all the way, but like I want to make sure I remember that moment where I blamed you, and I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry that it felt embarrassing in front of people. Yeah, what would feel reparative just like right now about that mistake that I made before we get into like any other bigger things? Like what would be helpful?
It would be good to know that you care about me, and that you are not going to be selfish, and you are not going to make all of this all about you.
So, yeah, I do care about you, and I am really sorry that I really hear that the blaming you and the humiliating in front of, or embarrassing was the word. I'm really sorry, and I really do care about you, and I really do want to find a way to make that felt, and I'm open to reflecting on some of my own behaviors. I'm not going to apologize for like kind of the feeling of like selfish and all about me. I'm not totally clear on that yet, but I do care about you, and I do want to be here for the repair. Yeah, and in this moment, I'm still feeling like we're pretty spicy, and to go into the deeper self-reflection, I'm gonna need like a different kind of context. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, and I really appreciate that, because I know it might be tough to understand each other sometimes, but the only thing I want for you is to be able to recognize that sometimes you say things that can be truly painful to other people, and you have no idea what you can cause with that. And I'm open to talk, but as long as we can agree that we are gonna do that with respect and caring.
Cool. Yeah, I'm here for that. I think in this moment, I want to just like leave it at I'm sorry for that particular moment, and like find a way to approach this, because I want to learn about what you're saying, and I think there's some extra spice on it that doesn't resonate with me right now, and I don't want to go into that right now, but I want to find a time where we can explore that layer together, because there's something for me, and I don't want to be resistant, but I also don't want to like pretend like I agree with all of it all right away. So I appreciate you bringing the feedback, and like maybe we can just pause and give me a minute to like center, and then I will email. I'll follow up and just like figure out how we want to move forward. Does that feel all right?
Yes, totally, and I appreciate that.
So, you guys, thank you. Notice, right, the person in that receiving role, right? Did you feel the combination of connection and validation and boundary that was happening simultaneously? Right? It's like, I'm gonna figure out what I can take right now. Like, what are you saying that I just agree with, that I can actually care about, that I can actually meet? I'm just gonna find that and do the best that I can, and then hold a little bit of a boundary that's like, I'm not, right? When you said selfish and all these things, like, I'm a human, I felt like, all right, but I didn't come back with, I'm not selfish. That's just gonna escalate. I just came back with like, I don't agree with that, but like, here's what I do agree with. And you feel how that just de-escalated the whole thing until we get there. And like 99.99999% of the time, the person has got something real. If something really spicy is coming at you, something is real in what is happening. And it might be a speck, but the faster you can find the speck, the better we're gonna do it. And the more resistant you are to the speck, and the more fixated you are on all the things that don't land, the faster it blows up.
And we have tools to help you manage your nervous system and really think about finding that speck, right? The truth that the other person is trying to share with you, right? But you'll notice in that interaction, you have to be aware of your own nervous system, right? Because if you get triggered to a point and now it's like, no, I'm not selfish, you're da-da-da. Now we're out of control. And that is not going to be useful to helping us resolve the situation, right? It's just gonna escalate it. And so it's important that you're able to get back into stretch or that sweet spot to be able to manage that, right? Yeah. Are you ready to, okay.
So we went through the individual layer and the interpersonal layer, which both of those are really just about awareness. It's both, like, on an individual, it's like, yo, you got a body, like, try to be aware of what's up and make good decisions. And then on the interpersonal layer, it's like, when things are about to get spicy, if you can just be like, hey, things are getting spicy, I'm doing something that's the best I can try, like, that helps create a little bit of container. And inside of organizations, there are times where conflicts balloon out of the ability to do that. Your organization as a whole needs to come in and intervene as a crew. So organizational processes are about understanding that moment. And the simple idea that we're going to leave you with on organizations is that there's different kinds of conflicts, patterns of conflicts that emerge inside of organizations. And the better that you can see what that pattern is, which one of it is, the better you'll be able to intervene. And they often get convoluted. So one of them is like a polarized substantive conflict, right? This is the one where, like, me and Tam, like, we got into this disagreement like yesterday. 2 days ago, we were arguing about this, of like, should we give away everything we create for free or should we charge for everything, right? Wow. There's a substantive thing, which is like, what are we gonna do with this course that we created? We need to make a decision. One person wants to charge for it. The other person doesn't. The person who wants to charge for it is a terrible, evil capitalist, just money hoarding. And the person that wants to give it away is just a naive and privileged nonsense white guy, right? Whatever, right? But instead of doing that, right, you can feel it can go there really fast. But underneath it, there was actually just, we need to figure out an agreement about this thing. So being able to spot that that's what's happening, then we want to bring our attention to figure out, like, how do we resolve that substantive issue. We have all sorts of things if you want to nerd out with us more. There's also performance issues, which often are underneath conflicts. So like ultimately the conflict is not that Tamala doesn't feel like heard and respected by Simon, it's that Tamala like thinks that Simon isn't doing his job and isn't being accountable. And that every time she brings that up, then she doesn't feel heard, right? So there's something like a performance issue. Then there's escalated conflicts, which are just like when two people just keep rubbing each other the wrong way, and at some point they can no longer work together, but it's kind of like a co-created messy dynamic. That's another thing that can happen, which is different from like grievances, where it's not co-created. Somebody is just one person is doing something that's beyond the pale of what is acceptable in the group, right? And those are all very different, and they all require very different interventions. So if you want to take our courses, we can go into all of these different things. But for here, we just want you to call your awareness to like, if you want to create a conflict policy, you don't want to do the same thing for all of those different things. If somebody says, I've been verbally assaulted, it's a different reaction than I'm having trouble working with this person. And that is different from, this person's driving me a little out of my mind, but really it's that I don't think they're doing their jobs. These are different processes you want to be able to start. And underneath the organizational process discernment, and something that is like a huge theme in our movement spaces, is the difference between hardship, harm, and accountability. So hardship is unwanted experience. It's something you don't want to have happen. Harm is when somebody fails to meet their obligation toward you. And a lot of us, what we are doing as a movement is often calling all hardships harm. Anytime I experience something that I don't want, it is because someone else harmed me. And sometimes we are experiencing something that we don't want because someone harmed us. And sometimes we are just experiencing something that we don't want, and it's not appropriate to characterize that exclusively in the paradigm of someone harmed me. One of my teachers put it this way. There's a difference between pouring salt intentionally on a wound and having a knife and opening a wound. And there's a difference between pouring salt on a wound intentionally and being messy with salt and it mistakenly getting in someone's wound. These are all very different things that require different types of responses. And the better we are at discerning that, the better we're gonna be able to be at like accurately responding to harm and increasing our own ability to be with hardship in a way that is very transformative. And that comes back to the nervous system awareness of like, can I meet the moment, get myself into the sweet spot, be aware, make an intentional decision, and then find something dope.
And I've seen a bunch of y'all taking pictures. I love that, but we are going to give you access to this slide deck, right? You'll get a self-reflection guide that will walk you through questions that will help you understand what you're experiencing in a conflict, what you want, what your intentions are. Then also a conflict style survey on the interpersonal level that you can socialize in your organization to help people become aware of how they deal with conflict, where they usually go when their nervous system is out of control, how they best like to receive feedback so that everybody can be aware in that way and engage with each other intentionally. We'll also give you the generative sentence starter tool with a lot of examples. And then lastly, on that organizational level, we'll give you the organizational action flow chart, right? So Simon just went over those 4 different scenarios. We've got a flow chart that can show you what your organization can do in response to those types of issues. And then lastly, we'll give you a template for a conflict preparedness policy for your own organization so you can have these things in place before things pop off, which is the best practice. All right, but thank y'all so much for hanging out with us. If you have any questions, we're here for that. Thank y'all.
If you want to yell at me, apparently I'm doing that now.